Welcome. Thank you for joining our Enterprise Content Management, Quality Compliance, and Business Intelligence Best Practice Series webinar. I'm Melody, your hostess for today's presentation. Edwin Paoli, USDM Senior IT Consultant for Life Sciences, will be presenting. The discussion today will cover introductions, webinar logistics, direction for post-webinar collaboration, and our discussion topic, maximizing reporting for TrackWise using business intelligence. We're fortunate to have Edwin on our team as he offers 15 years of experience working in information technology. 12 of those years have been focused on information engineering, application integration, implementation, business intelligence, system analysis, and computer system validation. He's a member of the Association of Information Technology in Professional Park Ridge. It's in Illinois. Data management is focused exclusively on the life science domain. We're a market leader in providing IT, quality and regulatory compliance professional service solutions to the heavily regulated life science industry. We're headquartered in Ventura, California, and we have various practices, which include ECM and QA auditing, of course, ERP, CRM, GRC, and clinical and drug safety. We're a compliance partner for many best-of-breed vendors, including Agilent, Sparta System, which you know, TrackWise, OpenText, Oracle, and SAP. We're very proud of our proven track record, and we've completed successful projects with over 130 life science clients. We offer hands-on experience assisting clients who are in regulatory distress, and we are the market leader in offering validation accelerator packs. The content today will be covered in approximately 30 minutes, and then we'll post questions team via the iLink message board, which is on the lower left of your screen. Or you can join the discussion on LinkedIn and post any questions there. If your questions are of a confidential nature, I'm happy to keep those offline. My contact will be provided again at the end of the session. It's rmelody, M-E-L-E-D-Y, at USDManagement.com. Thanks again for joining us, and now I'll turn the presentation over to Edwin.
Thank you, Rebecca, and I also want to thank the audience here and hope by the end of this webinar the information provided today will serve you in your current projects or future projects. Our agenda today is summarized within these 4 bullet points. I will be providing information with regards to TrackWise reporting options, methods for displaying data content, known better as data sources, SQL optimization and tuning using database tools, and relying on some of the Crystal Report option to improve performance. Before anything, I do want to mention that this webinar is in no means to serve as a training program on the use of TrackWise, databases, Crystal Reports, or SQL. It's meant only to serve as a guide on how to utilize database tools and Crystal Report tools in the context of improving report performance within your environment. That being said, we're going to move into the problem statement and go. One of the most common issues I've experienced within TrackWise environment is that users complain about the time it takes for a report to generate. Now, this may not be the case for all reports because not all reports have the same design or require the same amount of data sets, but we can agree that reports returning large data sets do require more resources. Therefore, it impacts the performance of a report. So what is our goal? Our goal here today is to provide tips and techniques on how to improve report performance by using database objects, SQL, and Crystal Report tools. I will also provide during this webinar information on how to make use of TrackWise reporting methods and where TrackWise stores reports developed within Crystal Reports. You also see, you may be asking yourself right now, what are these numbers coming from? I've worked in many reports and, tuning and optimizing, and performance results differ from report to report. But these numbers are true to one of my recent projects, which I was given the task to improve performance on a report that was taking more than 5 minutes to generate, and in some cases it actually crashed. This actually was a really critical report. After a thorough assessment on the report, I realized it would have taken me much longer to optimize or tune the existing design. Therefore, I concluded that it needed to be redesigned. I needed to start from scratch on this report. While designing the report, as I do with any other reports, I strictly followed the tips and techniques I will be providing you here today. The results was substantially noticeable. From more than 5 minutes to less than a minute, that's major improvement. Users were really happy about this report. Now, this may not be the case for every report, but any performance gain, any performance obtained is actually a gain. Move on to the next slide, and as I mentioned earlier in my previous slide, I'll be providing information on how to make use of TrackWise reporting methods and where TrackWise stores reports developed within Crystal reports. Something that I've seen very common, a common pattern is that users tend to make Crystal report inquiries when in fact they could have used the reporting methods offered by TrackWise, which in many cases they probably will be much faster, providing you better performance. As a developer, I like to assess all options available and determine the best method for the user. In my case, I understand the TrackWise database structure. Therefore, it eases the process for report development. And in my opinion, it is critical for a report developer to understand the database structure, especially the TrackWise database. As you can see here in this slide, I outlined several TrackWise reporting methods. I've used some of these methods and actually been able to provide the report that the user is looking for instead of going on and creating a Crystal report. Methods that you have, it's the Ad Hoc query. This is found in the desktop of TrackWise. For many users here that probably already use this query here, this tool, I'm sorry. Within this tool, users can actually filter and display data immediately to your desktop. As well, you can use it within the TrackWise web reports, which you can use it within your query, and it also depends on the scope. It also provides dashboards, which is very useful for summarizing information. And one of my favorites is the ad hoc reporting. This is a very useful tool, and I've been able to actually use this tool a lot because many times users make inquiries about creating a report and wanting to export that information into an Excel template or some other format at CSV, which is comma separated value, in order for any type of statistical information they're doing on their side with Excel or any other application. The ad hoc reporting actually requires, the build of a template, and you can define the fields within templates. There are pros and cons to this. I mean, if you're looking just to display just the outline of fields from a project and being able to export that immediately to an Excel document, this is the right method to go about. Instead of going and creating a Crystal report, they may require a sub-report and find out that during the export transition, there are certain empty columns and empty rows. So now it produces more work for the user. I mean, the user has to go in and clean all these empty spaces. Another bullet point here, the charting reports. This is pretty good. Actually, it's a graphical report. TrackWise does allow users to generate graphical reports. They can be based on selections, multi-selections, date, time fields. They're very useful too because they can provide immediately, an immediately graphic of what you're looking for. There's also pros and cons in this. I mean, if you're looking for a drill down effect on a report, especially on a charting, then yes, you might want to go into creating a custom report within Crystal. You also see here a bullet point for the report repository. This is, like I mentioned, this here is actually where Crystal Report stores TrackWise stores their reports. Many people here might know that the naming that TrackWise uses. However, this is actually where you can find all the reports that were built in Crystal Reports. It has the reports for like multi-reports, which are used within the TrackWise web report section. It also uses single reports. Normally, you see the single reports within the desktop on the bottom portion of your records. It's very self-explanatory. Only returns single records. You have your auto reports and your admin reports. Admin reports, I believe it comes with a series of admin reports already custom from TrackWise. So to this day, I haven't developed any for admin reports. I think they do a pretty good job in the admin side. Now we're going to go into the Crystal report for TrackWise. Here, this is where I actually start defining, what methods can you use, or what tools you can use in order to improve performance. The two methods that you see here, the Crystal report methods for displaying TrackWise report data content, are widely used within the TrackWise environment, and it's a method on how to actually display data within the reports. It's mainly used within the report side of things. I kind of outlined here the pros and cons of each of these two methods. The pros, very self-explanatory, is automatically created using TrackWise tools. Basically, there is no need for SQL. There's no need for the individual to understand the SQL to develop this. This is actually created during the configuration of TrackWise. Actually, when you basically create a project, you can go on and when you define the data fields, actually would not automatically. You would have to use the tool, the TrackWise tool, in order to automatically create these views. Basically, these user-defined views, they characterize custom data fields defined during the project configuration. Now, what are views? Views are database objects. And views are basically virtual tables that consisting of a stored query. And the stored query has a group of tables interlinked within the key index fields or not. However, this has no data. It executes at runtime. The cons on this user-defined field is that it does impact response time due to repetition of table scans. And like I said, because views are a group of tables, basically it's a virtual table. It has a group of tables, and if you have 4 or 5 tables there in your query, it has to scan all these views. We also have direct table linking. Direct table linking is actually a method that I believe TrackWise offers this as to improve performance on reporting. Basically here, it uses the base tables that maintain PR information and ID, which are really good for data field value lookup. And this method actually minimizes the table scans and improves performance. The cons here, as you can see here, it requires running totals for every field. Now, therefore, it really impacts report response time. Imagine a report that needs to display 50 fields. So that would require 50 running totals within a report. And the way the report is processing, a running total, it has to, when it passes this information to the database server, it has to translate that running total into a query. And it has to compile, execute, check syntax within the server side. Therefore, it really impacts response times on the report. basically here in these two methods, the cons kind of like outweigh the pros. They can be used within a report. I mean, if the acceptable execution time, if there's an acceptable execution time, then fine with it. But for large data sets and reports that needs to, display all this information, there are other methods. And that's what we're going to jump into, the next methods that are available. These are methods that I've actually used within Crystal Report to improve substantially the report performance. I start out with stored procedures. Now, stored procedures basically are recognized within any database, RDBMS, and they can improve performance and scalability of any application. As I define it here, stored procedures are stored and compiled within a database server. Therefore, no need to compile at runtime. Stored procedures are built within PLSQL, which is basically a programming language proprietary to Oracle at this point. Well, actually, it's Oracle. Along with packages, it actually improves performance, like I said, substantially. It actually loads into memory, which makes subsequent access to objects in the package much faster. This is a pretty good way of, if you have a large data set, you can actually use a stored procedure to execute, because now it executes on the server, so it relies on the database server specs. So it makes good use of that. So what are the cons in this, on the stored procedure? Well, because it loads the package into memory, it requires additional memory. So it has a memory cost to this. And the other con that it also has that it needs to be, if you're migrating over to a different database, then the syntax needs to be updated. So basically, you need someone on board that understands the syntax and can rewrite this on any other database language. Then we can move on to the materialized views, another method for displaying data content. The materialized view basically it encapsulates the results set up at query. It's also known as a snapshot. Snapshot. I mean, these are widely used through data warehousing, which improves performance on expensive and complex joins. The cons on this materialized view is that it's only good as to the date that the last time the materialized view has been refreshed. So therefore, it's only presenting a certain amount of data, depending on when you executed that materialized view. However, you can overcome that by creating a refresh on a set schedule. There's many ways of actually setting that to actually execute at a time that maybe a network is not as at peak performance, so it actually will refresh and bring up to date the materialized view. Now, something else that I didn't mention between these two, especially materialized view, it actually has a storage cost, basically because materialized view creates another table and saves this information into that table for the next execution. So if it's executed again, it's only as good as the date as the last time the materialized view was actually refreshed. So it's a good practice to have it refreshed on a set schedule. So both of these methods are pretty good, and I have used within TrackWise as well as I've used within any other method that uses Crystal Report as a third party too. This does not only apply to TrackWise. The same concept can be applied. These two methods here applies, to any other Crystal Report development. Now we move into the Crystal Report performance tips. Now, what I'll outline here is today. This is whatever you see here right now. It's not something that I have actually created or I invented. This is actually information that I've gathered throughout the years that I've actually worked with Crystal Report. This is not specific to TrackWise, so it's something that I've acquired, knowledge that I've acquired throughout the years, and it's a good practice actually to follow through. One of the things that I like to do within any environment, I think many companies do this as well, they create templates for their TrackWise reporting. However, I like to create templates with predefined SQL options. SQL options can be found within the application itself, and you can actually set up several options there. So I provide two options here, which these two options are very, very critical within a report here. So I provide use index on service for speed or perform grouping on server. Now, the options, this menu that Crystal Report offers, basically it's for you to set up certain things to run on the server. Instead of running on the client computer, it runs on the server. So setting these options on would actually improve, performance on your report, because now it executes at the server side and not on the client. Another thing is that I like to, whenever possible here, the bullet point states here, I like to use link tables within indexes. I mean, this is very common for any development on reports. You want to make sure that the table has an index key, and if you're linking that table to another table, you want to make sure you're using the indexes. TrackWise does make good use of this. I understand when you configure your database and you update your database using the tools from TrackWise, it actually updates. You have the option to update all the indexes, which makes good use of indexing all the tables within TrackWise. One of my favorites here is that use SQL expressions within the record selection criteria and with explicit column names, not asterisk. Not many people make use of the SQL expression. They always, within the record selection criteria on a Crystal report, they normally would use just a field, a formula within the selection criteria, and sometimes this can impact the report because it's returning the entire record. Like I mentioned here, if you're using formula, you want to set range limits on key fields to only return the records that are actually needed within the report. Also, if you ever notice when you create a report and you run the show query, sometimes you don't see in the show query you don't see the where clause there, and that's because the record selection criteria in the formula you didn't specify a key field on how to on what records you're actually trying to fetch or retrieve. But like I said, this is whenever possible, use the SQL expression, and actually makes it easier, because now what happens is SQL expression is the same syntax used on the server, on the database server, so it doesn't have to translate that SQL expression. If you're using formulas, it does need to translate that formula over. Next is use suppress, no drill down instead of hide with section. This is honestly, you should not be using hide unless you're using a drill down effect report. You should always use suppression, no drill down on a report. I've seen this many times where they're hiding it instead of actually using the suppression. Use manual running totals whenever possible. These you can set up your counters. There's certain formulas that you can actually build that would create running totals instead of using running totals. I mentioned earlier one of the methods TrackWise used for direct table linking, they have to create running totals, and again, these running totals have to be translated in the path that it goes, from the path that goes from Crystal reports to the database server. It has to translate, compile, and then run. This actually, decreases performance on a report. So try to use, less running totals and maybe use manual running totals with formulas. Avoid deep table linking. avoiding table linking is very common when developing reports. I've seen this many times. And to kind of explain what I mean here is basically, table linking is basically, if I have, for example, table A, B, and C, and I'm trying to retrieve records from table C, well, I've seen many times where they're actually using table A that links to table B, B that links to table C, when in fact they could have used table A and linked to table C. Avoid table B because there is no need for table B. Therefore, it increases the performance. Avoid too many subreports. If possible, use on-demand subreports, arrays, or share variables. This is very, whenever possible, you don't want to use many subreports. I mean, I can see why sometimes within TrackWise it's kind of inevitable. You have to use subreports, but in some cases, if possible, use the on-demand subreporting instead of having the report execute that subreport every time the user execute the report. You can also use arrays instead of subreports to bring in some values, and the one that I use a lot is the share variables. Within the on-demand subreports, I can give you an example. In one of my recent projects, I also created a report that required audit information. Basically, it was a lot release report. Parameters were to, some of the parameters were actually to put in the lot number and even wildcards, not just the lot number itself, but the user needed to put, that was a requirement. They wanted to use a wildcard for in case they didn't remember the entire lot number. So the way I designed the report, basically, I used two different methods that I actually mentioned here today. Aside from all the other pointers that I provide here, the tips, I used two different methods for that report. Currently, right now, TrackWise stores audit information in a CLOP field, which is, it's a data type in the server side, which stores a certain amount of characters. It can store up to 4,000 or 5,000 characters in that field. So that's where you'll find some of the audit information. And the key here was to be able to search for the lot string. Lot as a parameter, I was passing in the lot number, so I needed to search for that string within that entire text. So using just the tools that TrackWise provides me wasn't enough. Using the user-defined fields that TrackWise offered wasn't enough either, or direct table linking. I actually use in this case I use a store procedure with a package, and it actually worked very good, very fast, and users were happy. So the information that was actually retrieved, because what happens is that I was using some aggregate functions on this store procedure. So basically, I was searching for a string on this text and displaying that string in the report. But I also used the on-demand report within this report because the other option was that not every time users needed this report. It was only whenever they executed the on-demand, and it would actually display the information. However, it was a good design, and actually the results were great, and it improved performance on reading and writing. Reading, not writing, on the report. Another bullet point here: remove unused formulas and tables. This is something that I've seen a lot within Crystal reports. Many times I've seen that it still has formulas and tables that are not being used. Basically, this is considered to be dead code. Within a report, you really want to remove this. But in some cases, the way I practice this here is basically I like to keep my formulas in there until it has been approved, until the report has been approved, and it passes through all the quality gates that it needs to pass. But before it goes into validation and before I start documenting this report or creating the function design specification for the report, I eliminate all these formulas and clear out all the tables that are not necessarily for the report. So here we're going to move into database tools. And what I present here today is basically what tools can you use from the Oracle side, from your database, in order to improve performance. Now, SQL Tuning is actually performed using various database tools, basically to improve the performance. And I outline here, I kind of split it between Oracle SQL and Microsoft Tuning, which are two of the major databases currently I've actually worked with. To be honest, I've worked more with Oracle SQL than I have with Microsoft SQL. So pardon me if I haven't listed all the other tools that Microsoft SQL offers for tuning. But I'm going to kind of be explaining on the Oracle side, the tuning. I'm going to start with the optimizer. I mean, maybe this is a little bit too techy, but for those that understand from the database side, these are actually, again, tools that are database tools that helps analyze your SQL statement. So basically, the optimizer, it's a cost-based optimization tool. It actually uses statistics and compiles the most efficient method for executing SQL statements. The explain plan. This here allows you to submit a SQL statement to an Oracle database and have it prepared for execution, and have it prepared for an execution plan without actually executing that query. You have outer trace. Outer trace actually it generates a report on the execution path used by the SQL optimizer. So it basically relies on the optimizer. After it executes, it provides an automatic feedback that can be analyzed and understand, and analyzed to understand the different technical aspects that you can use in Oracle to execute the query. SQL Trace. SQL Trace is another tool that provides the performance information on individual SQL statements. It actually generates statistics for parsing information, execution information, CPU. I believe it does commitments and rollbacks on the server, and TK-Prof. Basically, TK-Prof is it's a program that actually formats the contents into a readable format. All these tools together actually will improve your SQL statement. And within Crystal, you can actually, if you have worked with Crystal Report, you can actually display the query. You can say show query, utilize that query, dump it into SQL, and you use these tools in order to improve that performance. I mean, the Oracle these database tools are actually designed to improve your execution plan within your SQL statement. One thing that I've used, and I want to mention here, is that in the past, I've seen that there are certain limitations that you're not allowed, a developer may not have the tools to work directly with the database or use these tools, but what I have actually found very useful is to create a sub-report with an explain plan, because the explain plan actually, in this case, provides you the cost of CPU. How much CPU am I using, and it actually provides you other valuable information. I've used this as a sub-report within a report. So basically, I have a sub-report. I incorporate it into the report that I'm designing. I run the report, and I get the results. So that's it's pretty good. It gives you statistical information of, gets you kind of basically information on where there are bottlenecks on the reports. What can I do to improve this report? So if they don't allow you to, go directly to the database, I would say make good use of these. Find a way to. Matter of fact, I think you can find that in the internet as well. Like an explain plan as a sub-report. It's very useful very useful within your report. As a matter of fact, I've seen it also where some companies use this as for performance acceptance. And if it doesn't perform at how they expect it to be, then they will return it back to you, and you would have to go back into the report and redesign. So these are good tools actually for data, for tuning. So I always encourage everyone to, for those developers to, if the developer has no clue on how to work with these tools, try to establish a relationship with the database administrator, and maybe collaborate with the database administrator. And sometimes I understand database administrator must be real busy and don't have enough time to actually work with it, but try to get as much information as you can with these tools, because during your development you're gonna probably find that these tools are really, really useful. So here we move on to the next slide. Now, for a report or any other application, performance depends highly on the architecture design and the underlying components of your network. Bottom line, if your network it's not fit for the type of information that you're actually processing, or it's not configured properly, then it doesn't matter what you do on the report side, on the crystal report side, or on the database, you are still going to always face issues. As I mentioned here, you have database and application server hardware specs. These are very important. And I only outlined several components. There are numerous amount of components that will create an impact if not designed properly or are not up to date. Imagine you're trying to execute a report which will return a large amount of data set, and your network is at its peak. Well, your report is going to take some time to actually execute. So it's good to, and I believe that network administrators do always keep a good monitor of the network and make sure kind of create their gaps and say where in my network am I lacking, or what do I need to improve in order to make performance and scalability across my network at a predictable and acceptable manner. So it's very important. I can't stress this enough to make sure that your network infrastructure definitely needs to be up to par. So when configuring your switch, your storage path, your wiring, it's important. I also mentioned here, if you noted, local desktop specs. It's important as well to make sure your local desktop specs are actually up to par, and that they can actually process the information that you're handling day to day. Because, like I mentioned earlier, some things are actually parsed locally on your desktop, and some things are done on the server side. So you have a client and server relationship there. And in Crystal Reports, some things are handled within the client side, and other things are handled within the server side. So with that said, I kind of move it into questions.
Thank you, Ed. Appreciate that information. I will open the floor to questions now. And while you're typing these in, I'd like to remind you that the webinar has been recorded. It will be available on our website, which I'm sure you're aware is USDM.com. If you have additional questions that come up at a later point, please know that the USDM team has a dedicated TrackWise practice that can support you in developing new reports as well as resolving any performance issues you're having. Rather than having your technical wait for weeks in troubleshooting, a more cost-effective approach could team perform a basic assessment and then utilize our experience to resolve reporting and help you with solutions. In many cases, we projects remotely, which offers an even higher savings there. As an example, Edwin and the USDM has completed a remediation project, which for its tier one company is free, and we're resolving the issues that they were having with the reporting. Okay, looks like our first question here is Erin. She asks, will an image import impact performance?
I believe the question was how will an image impact performance? Is that the question?
Yes.
Okay. Well, definitely will impact performance. It depends on how you have your image set up. For instance, Crystal Reports offers dynamic imaging, which can store. Basically, what happens is it stores this image on a directory in a file. There's another option that can be done too, and this, sometimes I've seen it where they store the image on the server side. Now, this can cost some, storage, because storing images on a server is very costly. I mean, they're very big files, so I personally don't recommend to use that. However, in my opinion, I think that in order to have images on a report, I think you have to have adequate resolution and size. You have to ensure that the image has sufficient size and quality. Another recommendation is to make sure that the image format is a compressed format. Like I believe JPEGs and PNG are actually good reporting formats. So, and understanding report branding it's needed within most companies. They like to have their logos or their slogans. So if I were to actually put image on a report, I would make sure that again, like I mentioned, there's sufficient size and quality. The image format is compressed, and you utilize a JPEG or PNG format. And to do this, you can use image editing software or application to actually edit these images.
Very good. Next question is from Fred. He'd like to know, aside from database tools, how can a Crystal Report developer troubleshoot report performance?
So basically the question is, aside from database tools, how can a Crystal Report developer troubleshoot report performance? Well, Crystal Report Designer offers report performance information. This information can be found in the reports menu, and it would display information, processing information of the report. So basically, I personally use that as one of my tools at the beginning in order to troubleshoot where is my bottleneck, where am I having issues within the report. So it actually lays out, the cycle between the client and the server, processing time, and all, CPU, I believe, CPU calls as well. So it provides some useful information for you to go back and improve performance. Any other questions?
Thank you, Ed. Yes, another question, let's see, from Lawrence. Any workaround to add grid field in ad hoc reporting?
Well, ad hoc reporting, that's more of a TrackWise function. Within the report itself, it's normally configured as a sub-report. But in the ad, like I mentioned earlier, these are some of the tools that you can rely on in TrackWise is ad hoc reporting. But this is basically more of a TrackWise function. So maybe in the future they'll probably add this into their current functionality. Next question.
Thank you very much. And we'll take one last question here. Jake is asking, I wanted to know how you came to the determination to use a store procedure in a materialized view.
Well, the reason and this goes back to the report I created for the lot release, the reason I came to use a stored procedure instead of a materialized view is because the information that I was trying to grasp here, it's dynamic. It changed often. So it's not always the same information I'm trying to retrieve, same string, same parameter I'm passing. I needed to pass a parameter to my data source, my data set, and stored procedure was actually my choice because it handles pretty quickly and it actually executes faster on the server. So instead of using a materialized view where I'm trying to, encapsulate all the results set in a query, it made, I prefer to use the stored procedure because again, it's a much faster process, in my opinion. Next question.
Terrific. Looks like we need to wrap up. We're running out of time here today. Everybody for joining today, and we do trust that the information shared has been useful for you. We welcome any additional, again, send them directly to me and to Ed at email r@usdatamanagement.com. We would encourage you, though, to join our discussion on LinkedIn, and we encourage you to send us ideas if you have specific issues or topics that you'd like our experts to present. We'll support you there as well. We do have some upcoming webinars across the various USDM practices. On the USDM team, we did the opportunity to team with you towards excellent clients. Thanks again for joining us, and have a wonderful day.